So years ago, I used to live in a pretty populated city. I lived with my family, my mum, dad, sister, and my 2 dogs. We lived in a 2-story house in a suburb near the city. My dad worked downtown, so we were down there frequently. I should also mention that around the time of this story, I was about 8 or 9. This particular day, a Friday in the middle of summer, was just any normal day. My sister was sleeping over at a friend's house. My mum and I stayed home all day watching movies. And that evening, we decided to go meet my dad downtown and get some ice cream, since he was about to get off work. Fast forward about 3 hours later, it's about 9 or so, and it's dark out. Since my mum and I drove her car to meet my dad, and my dad had his own car, we were separated, but arrived home at the same time. I was in my dad's car. My mum pulls into the driveway first. I noticed when her headlights shined into our fence, the gate was wide open. We knew for certain that we'd shut and locked it, having 2 huskies and all. My mum got out of her car and gasped. My dad stops the car and we both get out. My mum is crouched down, checking the damage on the fence gate. Apparently whoever broke in, we assumed, used some kind of tool to pry it open, since almost half the boards on it were bent or broken off. The next thing I noticed was that our dogs were both freaking the hell out. Then I realized the window by the door was broken. My heart dropped. Now, by this point, I was legitimately scared. My dad pulled out his pocket knife and went inside. I also grabbed my bat, which was under the porch. My mum just stood by the door, begging my dad not to go in. He said call the cops, which she did. My dad and I slowly went into the house. The first thing we noticed was that the little TV in the kitchen was gone. Fuck, my dad swore. Now I was more angry than scared. Whoever broke in must have ransacked the whole house. That probably meant the living room TV and my PlayStation were both gone. I took a knife from the drawer and put it in my pocket, just in case. I don't know why my dad didn't stop me since I was only 9, but I guess he didn't care based on the current situation. Still unnerved, my dad and I inched through the first floor of our house. When we checked the living room, of course, our main TV had been stolen. When we let out the dogs, still freaking out, into the front yard, the house was silent. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. But there were more than one pair. There were at least 2 of these goons in my house. It sounded like they were in my parents' bedroom. Obviously, they knew we were home. They probably ran to a nearby closet to hide in. I gripped my bat tighter. "Whoever the fuck you are, I won't hesitate to blow your head off," my dad yelled up the stairs. I'd never seen my dad get this angry before. My dad didn't actually own a gun. He obviously said that to make them scared. And it must have worked, because we heard the footsteps shift from the master bedroom near the stairs to the other side of the house, which must have been either my sister's or my room. Right about then was when we heard the sirens approaching our house. I heard a very loud and distinct "shit" from the upstairs of the house. Once the police stopped in front of our house, my mum came running into the room. I quickly told her that there were at least 2 goons hiding in the upstairs and that some of the stuff was stolen. Then we heard a banging on the front door. "Police!" I rushed to the door and let them in. "We have a call saying that there was a break-in here," he said. "Yes," my mum said, crying. She said something along the lines of, "They broke in through the back while we weren't here. They're upstairs. There's a broken window." The cops said, "We understand. We'll go check it out." I suddenly felt safe. They went upstairs and not even a minute later, they were yelling, Get down! Soon after, the cops had two criminals handcuffed and were escorting them down the stairs. One of them looked to be in his mid-30s. He had a long, unkempt orange beard and a mustache. I remember he was wearing a baseball cap and jeans. The other guy was even younger and dressed in all black and was apparently wearing a ski mask, since the cop who was escorting him was carrying one. The cops told us that they were hiding in the closet in my room. They were also both armed with pistols, which freaked me out. We also learned that everything they stole was in a large garbage bag, which they handed to us. By then, many of the neighbors were gathered around our house, trying to see what was going on. I distinctly remember the cops driving away with them in the back. The bearded one in the baseball cap gave me a blank, creepy stare that I'm not going to forget anytime soon. When this happened, I was only 8 or 9, so I was traumatized for a very long time. After that incident, I always made sure that the doors were locked at night and had one of our huskies sleep on the end of my bed. We also installed a house alarm soon after. The thing that disturbs me the most is thinking what would have happened if we didn't go out for ice cream. Would they have broken in anyway? Would they have killed us? Had they been planning it for a while? It still sends chills up my spine to this day. Number 4. First, I suppose I should supply some context. I am a workout addict. I love to lift and run. I run about 12 miles a week typically, 3 miles, 4 separate days. Every day that I run, I take the same trails that surround the lake in my hometown. These trails are relatively secluded, however, usually have fellow runners and wanderers scattered throughout most times of the day, early evening. I always run through a particular trail that's my personal favorite. It's very near my home, not even half a mile away. This past week, my local gym was closed due to renovations, so I filled my week with about twice the amount of running as I couldn't lift. Because of my sudden increase in running, my tendinitis flared up. I always get overzealous and do that to myself. This will come back into play in a bit. Now, I'm hoping I'm able to describe this little picnic area and make sense. At a certain point, the trail guides you to an adorable picnic area. There are parking spaces and picnic tables, equipped with grills, scattered throughout the lakeside area. Families are grilling here constantly. It's lovely. Behind a certain table, often one of the more secluded areas, there's a great little dirt trail leading to a lovely cliff overlooking the lake. I have hung out here alone since childhood, as we always have had a rather safe area. I promise that this will be important later. Still with me? I hope that was all clear. I'm so spooked right now. I was finishing up what would be my last, before my tendinitis flared up, thus forcing me to rest. It was dusk and I was just about to cross the adorable park and onward through the trail toward home. When I hit the park, I stopped, thinking I might head towards my beloved hidden trail to take a brief rest on my favorite cliff. I am not one to be paranoid, and I'm quite adventurous. But after hours on Let's Not Meet, I decided, yeah, maybe not, and picked up my speed. I noticed a van parked, but there usually were people there. I didn't think much of it, maybe a fisherman, and moved along. I am so thankful for that. The next day, I had such brutal pain from overdoing my workouts that I could hardly walk, let alone run. I know, way too overzealous. I took some time off. This morning, I wake up to a news update from my news app stating that police are investigating a dismembered, burned female's body found at the lake a few hours before I had woken up. I opened the article only to find worse news. Where the body was found burned and gruesomely chopped was just in my favourite trail, right between the picnic table and my beloved cliff, less than 1 mile from my home. The area I run through 4 times a week, the same area where I almost explored just a night or so ago, as I'd done since I was in elementary. The same area that my let's not meet paranoia had averted me from that evening, with the same sketchy grey van I thought nothing of. They are still investigating. Nobody has been caught yet. I'm less than a mile away here, sitting in my dark house, praying that whoever did this gets caught fast. All I can say is how thankful I am to be safe. I'm also so grateful for not being the poor soul to discover the body, because that could have happened to me quite easily. I spend so much time up there, and it's so close to me. I still don't have a clue if the van was involved, but it seems odd, especially since I have a couple of friends, female, who used to run in the same area, but stopped after weeks of seeing a grey van conveniently driving by each time they ran. So far, I've run into a couple along the trails who claim to have smelled burning flesh days before the body was found. The wife happened to have worked at a crematorium. She said the smell is something unlike any other. This made me even more scared as I was running the trails even more so on those days. The police seem to believe that it was a man who has fled to Mexico. Update. I visited the site today, ran into an FBI agent, believe it or not. He was very secretive, obviously, but very friendly. He told me to stay alert and safe as he has a daughter as well. There were cameras in the wooded area around the burn site. I got a picture, although it's hard to tell. This is where they found her. Number 3. As can be inferred from the word ghetto, my neighborhood was pretty horrible, crime rate-wise, with a strong divide between ethnic groups. Seeing as I'm Russian, my friends were also Russian, and what friends they were. Ron, Andre, and Eli were my best friends in 5th grade. We were the coolest kids ever. So cool that we had our own Zula. A Zula is a Hebrew slang word describing a private place, usually built by you, where you and your buddies come to chill and hang out. I guess the American equivalent to a Zula would be a treehouse. Trust me, this is all very important info. Ron, Andre, Eli, and I found the perfect place to settle down and claim as our own. The ruins of a roof of an old bunker next to a tree in the middle of a field on a hill. It was positioned on a somewhat steep hill and it looked like a concrete bunker in a sea of tall yellow grass. We travelled the neighbourhood in search of discarded items and furniture to bring back to our Zula, and came back with a magnificent cum-stained couch, a rug, and old school posters of naked ladies. Our Zula was officially complete, the most wholesome one in town. Andre hung his naked ladies on our tree and was very proud of his work. Andre, Ron, and Eli had a tradition. They would skip school every Wednesday to hang out at the Zula, and since I was the tomboy, I terribly wanted to get into their boys' club. So naturally, I'd start skipping Wednesdays with them. And for a while, it was great. We'd play cards, discuss 5th grade politics, and prank call our neighbours. Until one day, Andre just had to do a stupid. You see, when little horny Andre picked up those naked damsels from the streets, he also picked up a business card, an escort service card. One Wednesday morning, Andre decided that we just had to prank the poor hooker. Eli, whose role was to be the clique's official dumbass, instantly agreed that it was a good idea. Ron and I, however, were a bit more skeptical of Andre's seemingly harmless ruse. But you know how peer pressure works so well on 10-year-olds. Andre calls the number and puts it on speaker. It rang and rang until someone answered. A man who I can only imagine was the girl's pimp. The man told Andre he sounds like a big boy in an incredibly creepy way. Mind you, Andre did have somewhat of a deep voice in comparison to normal 10-year-olds. So when Andre, that beautiful idiot, decided to seriously buy a hooker, he had no objections. Andre proceeded to give him the closest fucking address to our Zula and an exact description of how it looks like. As soon as the call ended, Ron flipped out on Andre and left. Eli and Andre were super pleased with their prank, and I just sat there on the cum-stained sofa wondering what the fuck we just did, and is a hooker seriously going to arrive? Andre and Eli were sure the man got their joke. Well, he didn't. 10, 20, 30 minutes pass, and nothing. No hookers to be seen. We all laugh about our biggest achievement yet, and completely forget about the "what a big boy voice you have" man. I think it was an hour later, we saw a black van pull over the street next to our Zula's field, the address that Andre gave. Andre and Eli ignore my concerns regarding the inconspicuous van, and so I am the only one watching it. It went up and down the street, as if trying to see if there's any way it could drive into the field. It was impossible because it's sort of locked between the apartment complexes and a cliff, and then pulls over again at the original spot. At this point, you'd expect a woman to come out, but no. Oh no. Two men get out of the van and start walking uphill towards our field, towards us. I could feel myself screaming internally as I mentioned my buds to look. We all sort of freeze and have a little, "oh shit, what have we done" moment. And then one of the men yells out, "Big boy, I need to ask you something." And we practically leave a cloud of dust, getting the fuck out of there. We ran up the grassy hill, which gets quite steep as you approach its peak, when Eli falls and scabs his knee. We didn't notice him falling because he didn't make a sound, and by the time we saw him, we were too far, and even more terrified as the man was approaching him and us, fast. So we left him there, like the cowardly 10-year-olds we were, and kept running. We reached another bunker area in the upper street. It is Israel, bunkers and shelters are everywhere, and hid in one of the 4 concrete shelter buildings, designed like big old boxes. We gently closed the metal door, sat in the farthest, darkest corner, and waited. We could hear the men searching the other shelters, and at this point, we're pretty sure we're going to be found. The moment came, and the men opened our shelter's door. I remember his voice till this day, cold, eerie, disgusting. "We just want to talk. We came all this way for you." We screamed our lungs out, and by sheer chance, a couple who were walking their dogs came to the area to investigate our cries. They scared away the men with threats of police and their massive German shepherds, and we thought that that'd be that. We were so fucking relieved, but then we remembered. Eli. We quietly creeped back down towards our Zula, but didn't see Eli anywhere. Andre was the only one of us who owned a cell phone, so calling him was impossible. We thought maybe he'd managed to run back home, and that was our next destination. I remember we looked around carefully for the van. It wasn't parked in our vicinity anymore, so we walked down to that street, on a route which connects to my street and eventually to Eli's. We managed to get to my street, and at this point, we were sure the van and the men were gone. We were wrong. They circled the neighborhood. We saw them coming back behind us. We freaked out and ran up a long case of stairs. The van almost hit us and the stairs, breaking with a screeching tire sound, and one of the men jumped out and started galloping up the stairs, chasing us like a crazed baboon, yelling disturbing things at Andre. "You have such a pretty ass, it's gonna be mine." And that was the least disturbing comment of them all. We weren't fast enough to outrun the man, and in the middle of the staircase, just as we were about to break left into a rocky terrain, he grabbed Andre. Andre was screaming so hard by now. I've never heard him scream like this, and I was in tears. Then, in a moment of accidental courage, I picked up a rock and ran down towards the van. The man was so fucking close to shoving Andre in the back of that van when I proceeded to snipe his head with my trusty rock. It made him let go of Andre, miraculously turning him into Speedy fucking Gonzalez as he started to run away, still screaming his very soul out. I, on the other hand, was pretty much fucked. That man was so incredibly pissed. I never saw someone so angry in my life. The other man in the van yelled, "Grab her, she'll do," as I tried running away, but at this point it was futile. The man grabbed me by my hair and started dragging me towards the van. In what felt like hours being dragged to the van, I saw my older brothers running towards me with a metal pipe. They pried me out of the man's hands and proceeded to beat the living shit out of them. They were apparently attracted by Andre's ear-popping screams. They eventually let both of the men go. You gotta understand, in our city and neighborhood, it takes the cops at least 30 minutes to arrive, and nobody really trusted the police. My bros also feared that they might call someone up to come and get them. This entire live-action movie was done with me getting the ass-whooping of my life from my parents, my brothers getting a badge of honor, Andre getting psychological treatment, and Ron getting a pizza right after he left us without hooker calling consequences. Oh, and Eli got a cool cast on his arm when he broke it as he fell down the cliff in an attempt to run away from our kidnappers. We later drew dicks on it, like real friends. We never actually found out who those men were. Our parents forced us to get that business card and give it to the police, but the police never called us back. Don't even know if they investigated it. Our friendship slowly died as Andre, Ron and Eli succumbed to our neighbor's nature and became small-time drug dealers and started hanging out with questionable characters. So, moral of the story, don't ever go looking for hookers on shady business cards, not even to prank them. Number 2. I used to live in a town in Virginia that was, for the most part, pretty damn boring. I moved from that town to a neighboring one after I graduated, but I frequently drive back there to hang out with old friends from high school. A couple of days ago, I drove there to pick up my best friend so that we could see a late movie. It was around 9:30 when I pulled up to her street, and as usual, she was ready to go when I got there. I texted her and she told me to wait in the car for a couple more minutes until she was done. I had to do this pretty much every time I picked her up for something, so I didn't mind. I did the usual, messing around on my phone and such. I did that for about 5 minutes before I heard the sound of my friend pulling on my locked passenger door. I absent-mindedly went to press the button to my left to unlock the door, not wanting to look away from what I was reading on my phone. But for some reason, I decided to glance up at the last second. And holy shit, I am so happy I did. I absolutely shit you not. A man in a demented Halloween clown suit was standing right next to the door, trying to pull it open. I know it sounds so stupid and cliche, right? It was a scenario straight out of a creepy teen slasher movie. But there he was, wearing a grotesque mask, orange wig, and torn up striped jumpsuit. More than anything, I was weirded out at first. It's almost Halloween, so I thought maybe it was a sick prank. I've never really had a fear of clowns like some other people, so I was more concerned that some creep was trying to rob me. He was pulling on the door quite forcefully now, actually making my car shake. He pressed his right hand on the window so he could get more leverage with his left on the door handle, and my blood ran cold. In his hand was a huge hunting knife. Again, I know it sounds so cliche, but it was right there in his hand. I was completely frozen with fear. I couldn't even scream because I was so confused and shocked. He stopped pulling suddenly, and I silently hoped that this sick prank was over. He looked to his left, and I could hear the muffled sounds of him talking. I looked in my rearview mirror and was horrified to realize he was talking to another man, also dressed in a clown costume. I know what you're probably thinking. Why didn't she just drive away? I couldn't. There was a parked car directly in front of me on the street, and this second man was behind my car. This whole exchange had also only been going for about 45 seconds by this point, and my brain could barely process what was happening. The first man went to the back, pulling on the passenger door, while the other man circled around and came to my window. He began pulling it too, with much more force than the other guy. I truly thought that he was going to break the lock. My mind finally cleared enough to grab my phone and call my friend. The last thing I wanted was for her to walk out her front door directly into this. She answered and I practically sobbed into the phone, telling her to call the police. I was screaming so loudly that I hadn't noticed that the two had stopped. They were listening to me. I worked up the courage to yell that I had called the police. They exchanged looks from across the roof of my car, one shrugging at the other. The one by my door slammed his fists on my window one last time, and the two of them ran behind my car. I watched them in my side mirror until I could no longer see them in the darkness. A minute later, a huge pickup truck sped by me, and I caught a glimpse of them in the car. One was hanging out the window, waving the knife at me. I sat in my car alone, crying for the next 5 minutes. I was too afraid to get out of my car, and I didn't want my friend coming out of her house. The police eventually arrived, and I gave a statement. They searched the whole neighborhood, but they found nothing. They informed me that in the last 3 weeks, there have been 7 incidences of men dressing up as clowns and harassing people. Most were stalking playgrounds and schools, sometimes holding guns. Another man was attacked the same way I was. There was even an Instagram allegedly made by this group, telling people not to leave their houses at night and listing locations they were going to hit next. The cops have no leads, but they believe it was multiple men. My whole town is terrified now. It's even started happening in neighborhood counties, and the attacks are getting more aggressive. I can certainly say my little town is not so boring anymore. Number 1. Other than the brief period where we needed to remain undetected from car headlights, the ever-present darkness persisted in being our enemy for the whole of our exploration of the compound. It seemed that when a moment occurred which we found puzzling or disorientating, such as the moment we were currently experiencing, the darkness would focus its intensity around us, caressing us with like malice intent, as if it knew our fears, as if it knew we should not be there and was punishing us as a consequence. In that moment, the yellow of the police line was the only thing I could perceive within my field of vision. I paused as I took in what I saw before me. In all my experiences of urban exploring, I'd never come across a police line or a potential crime scene. What had we stumbled into? After what just happened with the random strange man pulling up to the main entrance, muttering those strange words, and now seeing this police line, something didn't feel right. I wouldn't blame you if you're currently sat there listening to this and thinking, something doesn't feel right now? What about exploring the compound late at night to begin with? That's not right. I shook myself from this alarming thought process and did another scan of the cordoned off area with my flashlight. I couldn't see anything to suggest initially until I shone my light on the floor in the middle of the lined area. After initially quickly double-taking, I froze. A and B noticed this quick double-taking of the flashlight and came over. "See, everything okay? What are you looking at?" B froze as he looked onto what was illuminated by my torch. "Is that police line, do not cross?" "Why would that?" A also froze as he was the last one to lock onto what B and I were already stunned by. "No way, is that? It can't be. Is that blood?" My torch had illuminated a blob-shaped patch on the ground. Its color was carmine red, which is also, rather conveniently, the color of blood. Okay, something was definitely not right with this. Silence once again returned as we all probably came to that same conclusion. "Okay, let's not freak out and just keep calm," B said, surprisingly cool. "We don't know if this is real. It could be a joke." "Some messed up joke this is," I replied in stunned retort. "I don't want to be here any longer," he said shakily, almost begging. I could hear in his voice that he was the most affected by what we were seeing, but as he is Mr. Macho, this didn't put him off of our ultimate mission. "We still have more buildings to go. Let's leave this. Forget about it. Forget we even saw it. Let's go, please." "Wait, you still want to carry on exploring this place after seeing that?" B questioned. "See, you hearing this? Do you still want to carry on?" I had to make a quick decision without averting my gaze from the bloodstain on the floor. Did I want to carry on exploring? Other than a random man turning up and us stumbling across what looked like a murder scene, nothing out of the ordinary or dangerous had happened so far. I wanted to carry on exploring. I wanted to explore all there was to this place and never come back. Tonight, I thought, we so far hadn't come across any other sentient human life within the compound. There had been no movement. If we came another time, we likely wouldn't have been so lucky. Part of me, though, felt like we should be careful, as although physically I thought we were alone, I did feel like we were being watched. My decision was made. "We carry on exploring," I began, "but we need to be extra careful now. Any further action or movement that isn't us, we scram. We agreed?" "Fine, agreed. Be confirmed. Let's go, torches off." With that, our torches flicked off. We jumped out the operator's building, leaving behind the stain and the police line, and pushing it to the recess of our minds so we could carry on our investigation of the compound. By now, I appreciate that our decision to continue on exploring the compound would come across as unbelievable, but we just had to explore the rest. It was all or nothing as far as we were concerned. In hindsight, we were probably giving in to our pride. We just had to accomplish this challenge. We walked back to the center of the town square to decide which building to investigate next. While we were deciding, we became aware of a couple of things. It was now 1 a.m. I'm not sure where the time went, as it felt like we hadn't explored much, but we must have arrived at the compound around 11 p.m. We didn't think checking the time was all that important. As it's the middle of summer, the sun will start coming up in a couple of hours, so we didn't really have time to mess about. With it being that late at night, or early in the morning depending on how you see it, and the fact that we didn't really work out how long the exploration would take, I could feel the slightest tinge of tiredness start to set in, and our nemesis, the darkness, probably wasn't helping with this. We never really came to an immediate consensus about which building to explore next because of the reasons above. We were deciding that we would only explore 2 more buildings, then we would have to call it a night. Which two? There were 4 left. The 2 big ones, the house-like one next to the operator's house, and the small ones opposite the sea-facing big brick box. A crazy idea suddenly popped up into my head. What if... I stopped while thinking whether it was a stupid idea, but I went with it anyway. What if we split up? As soon as the words left my lips, I felt the group's attention upon me. B had a look of alarmed expression, whereas A had a look of consideration as if he was weighing it up in his head. That could work, you know, A went on to explain. It would mean we'd cover 3 buildings in one and we could all explore the last building together. A was thinking along the same lines as I was. B, on the other hand, wasn't so keen. You were the one saying be careful back there. Did you lose your mind on the way over or something? B raved before sighing in defeat. Let's just get it over with. I'll go in the house-like building. A, you can take those 2 smaller buildings. And C, since it's your idea, well volunteered, you can take the northwest big building. We can all explore the big building on our west together. That fine with you guys? Well, I guess it was my idea. I couldn't go back on it. Plus, I'd have a whole big building to myself. I needed to build upon my fearless tag. I accepted defeat, if you could call it that. But just before we all went off on our separate directions, I went to lay down some ground rules. Fine with me, I carried on. But we all meet back by most an hour, and if you encounter anyone, try and find a safe hiding spot. Switch all light sources off and text the others. Obviously keep your phone screen light dimmed and covered. Don't shout out as we don't want to give anyone else's position away. We all stick to our own buildings, and please, no trying to scare each other. We're all on high alert as it is. If you finish before an hour and no one else is finished, find a good spot and keep a lookout for any activity. By the looks of things, none of our buildings have anything interesting on the outside, so it won't require us to be wandering around. Both A and B agreed, and we split. I walked slowly and sheepishly over to my allocated building, like a small timid child walking to the stage of a full school assembly. For me to even find an entrance required me to walk around to the front side of the building, which faced the sea. Due to the size of the building, this included a longer walk than I would have liked and potentially exposed me to both the sea breeze and anybody who just so happened to be lurking on the beach to the front outside of the compound. Just before I turned the corner to walk along the front of the building, I cocked my head and squinted my eyes to try and concentrate the light so I could see if anybody was hanging around. From what I could see, or couldn't see, nobody was there, and if anybody was there, it'd be too dark for them to see me. So I turned the corner. It should be noted at this point that, although I concluded nobody was there, it's crazy to think how you could be so lonely, yet feel like you have eyes focused intently upon you. Walking along the front, I could see that all the front-facing windows were all smashed in, to the point that it looked like there hadn't been any windows there to begin with. Plenty of options for entry and exit, but I logically chose to enter at the first one and jumped into the thick darkness. There was significantly more of a drop than I anticipated, slightly straining my ankle during landing, but I was now inside. Just me, inside this big dark building. Remaining quiet and listening for movement would be futile, as the sound of the sea violently lashing the shore occupied all audible sound spectrum in this room, which seemed to act as an amplifier. I switched on my torch and scanned the room to find papers scattered all over. Barely any of the floor was visible. What the fuck? I thought to myself as I focused my light all over the room and noticed that most, if not all, of the pages were either blank or barely legible due to how damp the floor was. Probably because of rain, and being exposed to the sea like this. I picked up one of the bags where I noticed some writing at the bottom which looked like a generic footnote. This book is property of the Ministry of Defense at HMS for the purpose of radar research. This document is protectively marked and is for the eyes of authorized personnel only. Radar research? Huh. I should have put two and two together, really. I tried to pick out other pages from the floor which may provide more information, but found nothing of significant importance. The only other thing dominating quite a significant amount of space in the room was an old-fashioned weighing machine. One of those big, metal and circular ones that looked a bit like a retarded grandfather clock. It still looked in working order, with the needle pointing at 0. I pressed my left foot on it to test it, and sure enough, the needle moved. Oh, what the hell, I thought, and stepped onto the machine fully, feeling it to press under my weight. The needle stopped on exactly 10 stone. 10 stone, huh? No difference in weight then, still light. Just as I'm about to step off of the machine, the front glass of it smashed, and with some force, the needle of the weighing machine was sent flying like a spear, just missing my eye when the resistance I felt, the resistance underneath the weight plate I had stood upon earlier, suddenly gave way, causing my knee to buckle. Fuck, that was close. Too close. If I had been any more to the left then, I shuddered to think. After my near miss, I decided it best to keep moving as I still had a lot of building to explore. I opened the already slightly ajar door and stepped forward and looked to my left into a fear-inducing endless dark corridor which seemed to span the length of the building. There were multiple rooms off to the left and the right of the corridor. So many rooms, so little time. I turned to my right to observe the rest of the corridor when my eye caught sight of something dead in front of me. It was a drawing on the wall of what looked like Slender Man with the words, "They are watching, they are always watching." That's not exactly encouraging considering my current plight. I quickly shrugged it off and turned to my right to see a small room with a staircase going upstairs and an emergency door which was boarded up. I stood and thought to myself for a moment about the options available to me. I could either go upstairs now and get what is usually the worst part over and done with, or I could search the entire downstairs, then go back on myself and finish the upstairs. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and peered up before deciding. It was pitch black and it seemed like the stairs went up forever, with the steps themselves being quite steep. I decided to do the upstairs first as I wanted to get it over and done with. So up the stairs into the darkness I go. As I cautiously ascend and reach the upper floor landing, I was instantly greeted by a foul, putrid smell which caused me to put my arm around my nose. Of course, just like the upper floor of the L-shaped buildings, it seemed even darker, and when flashing my light around to survey my new environment, I noticed more drooping mold and a damp floor splattered with pigeon shit, and to my slight apprehension, a large number of pigeon carcasses. This was not a place I wanted to hang around in for too long. I also noticed a closed door which I assumed led to the upper floor corridor. On opening the door, I was instantly greeted by another door immediately in front of me and a corridor that went left and then looked to turn to its right. As it's important later on, I describe the door as one of those typical classroom doors, mainly wooden with a blurred glass square panel at above average human head height. I shone my torch inside and could make out a medium-sized square room with dark shapes in it, but I couldn't make out any details. Visualizing a blueprint of the building in my head, I concluded that due to the position of this room, it shouldn't have any windows. There was no way I was entering this room until I'd at least tried to be sure that none of the dark shapes inside was someone crouched down, ready to pounce on me as soon as I entered. A slight knock on the door should suffice. If it made anything stir, at at least I had ample chance to get away before it came at me. I tried to knock slightly. Shit. A loud echoing clang that could have woken the dead is what I actioned. I froze dead there for a second, eyes peeled on the contents of the room for any movement, but also listening intently for any other movement from within the building. After a few minutes of no sound or movement, other than the background crashing waves, I felt safe enough to at least enter the room, closing the door behind me. It was a weird room. On the left-hand wall to the door I entered were numerous meters and switches that looked like they were installed during World War II. It looked like a bit of a cockpit with all the different buttons and controls with a rusted plaque that read Radar 1. On the wall and floor in front and to the right of the door were acoustic wedges. The wedges looked in very good condition, like they'd been put there recently, untorn and nicely placed. Odd, what would a place like this need acoustic wedges for? I pondered. I guess some abstract radar research, but they looked brand new. After playing around with the radar switches for a little while, hoping for something to happen, I decided there wasn't anything else interesting in this room and turned to face and open the door when I saw it. Or what was left of it, as I saw it dash off to the right as it had been caught. Someone was fucking watching me the whole time through the door's glass panel. That was it. My adrenaline had reached its peak and my body decided it was fight mode. All logical reasoning was now on hold. If the person had the audacity to watch me and then run when they got caught, they at least had the audacity to have me chase them down and reveal who they were. I thrusted open the door and took after them, smashing my hands against the wall to keep my balance. "I'm gonna get you, you fuck nugget." I got to the end of the current corridor and quickly turned right to continue my run down the new corridor. And I felt it. I felt the rush of air. It all happened slowly as my feet went first, and then my body, before my subconscious instinct forced my hands up to hold onto the tiny little ledge I had. In my adrenaline-induced rush, I didn't take a moment to observe my surroundings and notice the new corridor had no floor. As I dangled over the abyss of the floor below, being held up only by my hands, my senses were still coming down from being in overdrive when I heard it. Deep, disembodied, and seeming like it came from all around me. A slow, sinister laugh. Then, everything seemed to go quiet as I realized my current predicament. Why always me?